So I thought I'd do a video on intellectual content on YouTube. If you're looking for that and you're basically a thoughtful, educated, certainly libertarian-leaning type person, what you might be looking for on YouTube, I will go through some of the stuff that I found helpful and interesting, and I've kind of categorized the channels and the content based on intellectual stuff, comedy, and information, and then a few extra mentionables that I thought were good, or maybe they don't make videos as often as they used to, or things like that. So for intellectual stuff, really the top of the line, I think, is Ben Shapiro, Sam Harris, recently Jordan Peterson. I'll talk about what's going on with him. That's a very recent phenomenon, though, probably not even a month old, really. Aurini, which some people will probably cringe, but there is some good things about him. And then there's some institutional type stuff and more closer to libertarian stuff like Mises Institute, Tom Woods, LibertyPen, which is a channel, which is quite good. And then, of course, PragerU. And then philosophy, I'll mention a very good, he is an academic, he is a professor of philosophy. His name is Sadler. And then recently, someone who writes essays and then reads them off, and I think is good, and he's very new, he's only maybe a few months old, is Steve Patterson. So let me just talk about each of them. So Ben Shapiro is a Jewish, I don't know what I would call him politically. He is a classical liberal, I guess. There's probably some distinctions to be made there, but I'm not quite sure where to put him. There's all kinds of, there's paleo, and there's neo, and there's, I don't know, there's all kinds of things like that. But anyways, other than his religiosity, I think Ben Shapiro is fantastic. He's been doing all kinds of speaking events, and basically talking about leftist culture and how it's regressive. And more recently, he was banned at DePaul University in Chicago, and he showed up anyways, and they threatened to arrest him if he trespassed. I think it's a public university, so I didn't know you could do that. It's odd that someone could be, without being a criminal, you can be forbidden from entering a public space, and you could be arrested for trespass. I don't get how that's possible, but anyways. But he's quite good to look up, Ben Shapiro. He's also got a few books that are also good, but I haven't read any of his stuff. He has one book on real-time propaganda, I think it's called, and it's actually quite neat. I haven't read the whole thing, but I flipped through it. And he goes through a lot of TV and talks about the messaging and the propaganda within TV, like The Simpsons, for example, or anything really, Family Guy, and etc. You can look up stuff of what he thinks about it. I think even House is in it. He just talks about all kinds of TV shows. So anyways, Sam Harris, he has a podcast. You may know about Sam Harris. He was in the atheist movement with Hitchens and Dawkins and Dennett. Unfortunately, one of them is not with us anymore. But anyways, Hitchens is fantastic too, but he's not a YouTuber. He has all kinds of good lectures, but Hitchens is very good. But anyway, Sam Harris, he has a podcast. He likes to talk about meditation, and he likes to go on Joe Rogan every now and then, who has a famous podcast, and talk about UFC and fighting and martial arts. And yet I could just tell that Sam Harris has no idea what he's talking about, but he wants to be in the in group, so he tries to act like he knows what he's talking about in terms of martial arts, but it's just kind of funny. But anyways, Sam Harris, of course, is very good at acknowledging problems on the left, especially about Islam, but politically otherwise, he's really typical in terms of socialist type ideas, which I think are very dated, and especially having studied economics, it's just more and more, it's just really impossible to understand how people still have those kinds of ideas. But anyways, and Sam Harris also really was hard on Trump and very complicit with Clinton's faults. basically saying that really using the hyperbole on Trump and saying he was some kind of monster, and so we can therefore put up with Clinton's faults, which are corruption. So I think that really lowers Sam Harris's reputation, and I think he's taken a hit for that, actually. People like Thunderfoot, for example. Thunderfoot and even Sargon to some extent, I'll talk about him a little later, but also Sam Harris. When they talk about politics, they take a hit. They pay a price because they know that when they are right on some things, for example, Thunderfoot on atheism. Thunderfoot got famous because he does science videos, but he also did a whole long series on, it's like laughing at creationists or something like that. And those are very good videos, and that's why he got famous. But then when he started talking about politics, this guy's an academic. He got a PhD in physics, or was it chemistry? It's something like that. And of course, he's a researcher now, I think. And of course, he's a leftist, and is it anyone surprised? He works for the government, essentially. Of course he's going to be left-wing. Like any labor union, anybody who works for a university, when they're left-wing, it's not surprising. Like, hello, they want more money for themselves, so of course they're going to be left-wing, right? Because they'll get the government to give them more financing. The government pays off people who vote for them, whether that's welfare, whether that's the universities. Now, someone like me who's in the universities is not in that narrative because I'm not left-wing. So that's always odd. So if you find someone who doesn't fit the narrative, it's usually of interest. But if you find someone, if you find out that the Pope is Catholic, that's not surprising. If you find out that Thunderfoot is left, it's not surprising. So anyways, people like that, Thunderfoot, Sargon to some extent, and Sam Harris, they have all kinds of viewers that are more or less balanced, non-partisan. They appeal to both the left and the right. So if Thunderfoot and Sam Harris make fun of social justice warriors, or I guess it was Anita Sarkeesian really for Thunderfoot, and then the left, or the social justice warriors for Sam Harris, and talking about Islam and how it's a bad thing. That's not a left view. Left views are complicit with those kinds of things. They're complicit with terrorism and Islam. It's like Bill Maher, although Bill Maher again is outside that because he tends to be critical of Islam. So he's not fitting in the narrative there on that one thing. Otherwise, Bill Maher is outrageous. In his politically correct days, he had a show, I think it was in the 90s, called Politically Incorrect, and it was actually a very good show. And back in those days, Bill Maher was excellent, but somehow at some point he sold out and became a typical Jon Stewart, faux news kind of slander, misinformation, and laugh about it type comedy shows, which are pretty pervasive today. But anyways, so they have viewers that like them for those things, but then if they step outside those things and talk about politics, they pay a price because now their audience is split. So Sam Harris, when he talks about Trump, you should look at his video on that. His dislikes are 50-50, I think. It was either that or maybe it was worse than that. So you can tell, though, same with Thunderfoot, talking about politics, he gets massive dislikes. So they pay a price when they test their audience and they go outside what made them why people liked him in the first place. They liked his creationist stuff, and they liked when he made fun of the left, and they like when he makes science videos. I'm talking about Thunderfoot. But then when he doesn't do that stuff, then people will get mad. And same with Sam Harris. If he steps outside what made him great, he, I guess, believes that his intellect translates or transfers into all areas of inquiry. Well, he found out the hard way that that's not the case. So anyway, Sam Harris is mixed, but anyways, he is still worth listening to, but you have to hold your nose when he talks about politics. Next, Peterson, just recently, he's a psychologist in Toronto, University of Toronto, and he has actually an impressive resume. He was for a time at Harvard, and this is probably one of the reasons why he's getting, he's not a pushover, and his administrators and at U of T can't just fire him and get rid of him because he's been not towing the line on politics. And what I'll just briefly, there's been some policies, and I guess in the university, and also up here in Ontario, we have these human rights commissions, which are disgraceful, and they really should be just destroyed because they're not lawful, and they're really not certainly not part of our charter. But anyways, there's the under harassment policy and discrimination policy. It's now including gender pronouns, and as an instructor, you're expected to, whatever pronouns a student wishes to be referred to as, you are supposed to respect that. And it's funny, I think it was the University of Utah or something, or Ohio, or maybe it was Ohio. Some university put this policy in, and some student wanted everyone to refer to him as Your Majesty, as his personal pronouns. So, of course, when stuff like this happens, absurdities will quickly fall in. And so anyways, Peterson, though, is refusing to do that, and the university was threatening to fire him and threatening to charge him with discrimination under our human rights code up here, which is, again, Orwellian and awful. But he has gotten immense support from YouTube viewers and members of the public and things like that. And so he's been protected because of that social media outreach. And there's a debate, apparently, that the university agreed to have him on one side, of course, and then debating somebody else that's already been selected. And I guess it's happening tomorrow, although you won't see this video in time. But it's happening on Saturday. So it'll be last Saturday at 9:30. And I'm sure it'll be on YouTube, so you can go and look for it. So this is a U of T debate with Peterson. So if you just search for that, I'm sure you'll find it. But anyways, he's got some really good. So other than that controversy, this is why Peterson became a name at all, really, in the YouTube sphere. Otherwise, he'd just be an academic. But other than that, he has some very good videos on psychology on YouTube and on Nietzsche and on existentialism. So that stuff is worth looking up. He's got series on fear and some other things like that. So that's worth looking up. That's Jordan Peterson. So another one, Davis Aurini, which I put in the intellectual category, and I'm sure some people who might know him will think that's not worth putting in there. But I think Aurini is very Catholic and religious, which I think are regressive ideas or old ideas. I guess maybe I should preface that a little bit by saying that I think that religion in general, and certainly their metaphysics, is wrong, but I think some of their values and ideas are right. So as much as I don't care for the metaphysics, is the best way of putting it, of religion, so the whole God concept and fear of God and things like that, which is just man-made. Anything that you say, that anything you believe that God is or has, is really a projection about other men empowering themselves over you. That's what I think. I've thought that about religion probably since I was 10 years old. I've always thought it was a way to control other people. Sitting in church, I went to church until I was probably 15 or so. And I was even a server. And this was an Anglican church, though. But they have servers that wear white cloaks and lead in the choir with the cross and light the candles with those special, I don't know what they're called. There's some kind of special lighter. And there's a bell at the other end that you flip it around and extinguish the candles when you're leaving with the bell end. I did all that stuff. I sat way at the back, right beside the altar, for I don't know how long I did that for, about a year or so. So I should be a textbook religious, closest to God type, but oh no. I always thought it was just something to control people. And I also found that it seemed like what people most get out of religion is just the community aspect of it, getting together and talking to people afterwards, and the potlucks, dinners or lunches, or That's the real reason. It's the community feel. It's not the beliefs and the gospels. And the ministers have a tradition. The ministers also tend to be intelligent people. They have a tradition of being wise people and having thoughtful things to say, of course, but that doesn't mean that it's come out of the religion. It just comes out of the training, or it comes out of the intellectual respect. So anyways, so Aurini, let me get back to that. So Aurini has some decent videos on, he has some videos on devils, and that stuff, of course, is just nonsense. But he does have some stuff that is worthwhile. Like the reason why he got famous, well, not sort of famous, I don't know. Certainly not as famous as pretty much everyone else I'm going to be talking about. But he did a bunch of psychology videos, which were quite good. The various, if you think of like psychology as a moderation principle, and if you go too far on something, it becomes a problem. Like if you think of like the idea of courage is a good thing, but if you're too courageous, you're reckless, and if you're not courageous enough, you're fearful or a coward or something. He talked about that in terms of psychology, and it actually is quite good. So if you look him up and just look at his most viewed stuff, that's the good psychology stuff. And then there's a few other random podcasts he does about kind of the decline of the West and the decline of intellectual values. And he also talks about social justice warriors. So on that kind of stuff, he's good. But once he gets into devils and that's just nonsense. Those are ghosts and goblins and metaphysics and idiocy. Okay, Mises Institute. So they're an economics institute, and I've ordered I guess it's twice now. Twice now I've ordered books from them, but for some reason shipping to Canada for them is really expensive. So I always ship it to a U.S. mailbox, and then I get someone to pick it up for me and bootleg it over the border. So that's just to save money, though. But anyways, when I do the book videos, I'll talk about the economics books that I got from them in the last shipment. I got about maybe 6 books from them in the last shipment. They had a 50% off sale, but they sell Mises books, and if you've been watching stuff on this channel here, you will see all kinds of little audio clips of stuff talking about Mises's book. What was it called? Anti-Capitalist Mentality, I think. So it's what's called the Austrian School of Economics, and he's got all kinds of, the Institute has all kinds of his books they still sell, and there's other libertarian type books, like Rothbard's books, and there's other authors as well. But anyways, I'll talk more about that. But anyway, Mises Institute has good videos. They do the Odd Lecture, and Walter Block is a good one to listen to. And it's funny, there used to be, what's his name? There used to be a guy that he started what's called Liberty.me, a website, and it was supposed to be a libertarian social media website. And it kind of flopped. It didn't go very well. It used to have a paywall on it. You had to pay to be a member. But they kept lowering the price, and then eventually it became free. And they tried their best. It was started by Jeffrey Tucker. That's what I was trying to remember. And Jeffrey Tucker was affiliated with Mises Institute a little bit, but I think he was also from FEE, which is Foundations of Economic Education, something like that. Anyways, they tried their best to make that go. They had regular interviews, sort of, or podcasts, kind of. It was basically interviews with a couple people who volunteered and would interview various people. So that was always active. There's all kinds of people publishing articles on their own little websites on LibertyMe. And I actually did, I think, 1 or 2, just for the hell of it. Almost like a blog. Just kind of like your own little website. It was like your name.liberty.me. So you could have your own website with that name, that URL. And I think I posted 2 or something like that. I just tried it for fun, writing whatever you want, whatever topic you want. And I guess I'd consider doing that myself, just having a personal website, but I don't know yet. Haven't really thought much more about that, because of course I'm somewhat worried about using my name for various things, because especially if being involved in education, I can't really talk too much about views that I have that aren't, they're not mainstream in Canada, let's say. And they could be mainstream in the southern parts of the U.S. or most of the U.S., I guess, but not so much in Canada. Canada, it's pretty stuffy up here, let's say. People tend to be easily bullied into a moderate, or I hate to say liberal because it's a stolen word. Liberal used to mean freedom. It used to mean people who were like Herbert Spencer was a liberal, but today Herbert Spencer would not be called a liberal. And we even have liberal parties in Canada, liberal political parties. That's their name, liberal. The Liberal Party of Ontario, the Liberal Party of Canada, who's in that, which is the majority in right now, is the Liberal Party. But they're not liberal. They're certainly not classically liberal. That's why we've had to come up with a new word, classically liberal. So really, it's modern liberal. So Canada has these modern liberals, and I guess the worst of them are the social justice warriors, and the other ones are not as radical, but they're still stuffy. They still think they know better, and they still think that they have the progressive view, but they're often wrong, and they're often quite ignorant on economics. I think studying economics is probably the easiest way to make someone more reasonable. I find that economic illiteracy is quite rampant, and I think it makes a big difference. If you studied economics, I think it really changes your worldview. Okay, where was I? So the Mises Institute, yeah, so they're good on economics, and they've got a good lecture every now and then. So another one who's related to the Mises Institute is Tom Woods. He has a podcast. He's a libertarian, although what's funny is a good chunk of libertarians are religious, and that, of course, is injected a little bit into their worldviews. Although Tom Woods is good about it. He doesn't talk about religion that much, but he has a ton of kids, I think, and he did a PhD in history. And he's got, I think I've got one of his books now. I think he wrote The Politically Incorrect Guide to American History. Is that the one that he wrote? I think I've got one of his books now. Anyways, I guess I'll get to that when I talk about my books that I got recently. But anyways, Tom Woods' podcast is pretty good. He has all kinds of different guests on. And he has one pretty much every day. So he's good to listen to as well. Okay, LibertyPen is kind of related. LibertyPen, the person who operates LibertyPen, I don't think has ever revealed himself. He or she just finds good content, sometimes from Fox News, like John Stossel, who's very good, or just anywhere, really, any kind of stuff that he finds. Thomas Sowell sometimes is on there, or Charles Murray, Victor Davis Hanson, people like that. This person who runs this channel, LibertyPen, just finds good content and posts it. Posts like under 10 minutes usually. Some piece that he finds that he likes, and it's good. So LibertyPen is a very good channel to look at and subscribe to. But like I said, we don't know. I don't know who runs it, and I don't think, as far as I know, that person's never revealed himself, which doesn't matter, but it's still good content. Okay, now just a few philosophy, like specifically philosophy channels. So I think the best I've found, I used to watch PhilosophyTube by some British guy, but my God, is he pretentious and philosophically basically a very typical British Marxist. A lot of, it's funny, as much as Britain, and I've studied much of the history of Britain's teacher education and education system. So, and British people, at least in the past, had a very, and it certainly trickled over here in Canada too, because Canada for most of its history was British, really, and we really never separated from Britain. We still are basically a colony. Like, we're not like the United States that had a violent separation. We still have a governor general, which is reports to the Queen of England. So we're really not quite separate. We're not quite a distinct nation. Certainly not like the U.S. But anyways, Britain has always had a very um, strong sense of its history and its superiority and reputation. But when you speak to philosophers who are British, they're almost always Marxists, and it's very strange because that's not British, but it's been made British. So usually when you think of famous British philosophers, you think of Bertrand Russell, who was not a Marxist. But anyways, so this guy, the PhilosophyTube, its content was pretty biased. But if you want a more very neutral philosopher who makes videos, look up Greg Sadler. That's Sadler. He's got tons of videos where he's in his office and he stands up and he has a chalkboard, like one of those mobile chalkboards, on one of his walls or up against one of the walls, and he writes down a bunch of stuff on Aristotle, for example. He takes one of the selections, a selection from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, for example, and he'll do like a 15-minute little video on something on friendship, just recently actually. And it's really good. Sadler does very good stuff. So I recommend him if you want just little bites of, he's doing a long series on Hegel, and I haven't been watching that because I've never really been interested in Hegel. But he's got everything, Plato, Aristotle, everything. And what's funny, he got his start in a prison. He didn't go out of school and teach college right away. He started in a prison, and then eventually he got a college job. And I think he's in a bit of a precarious time of the career, which I'm somewhat wary of for myself, because he's moved from college to college a little bit, and then he also has side money generating things. Like he's got some little company that he runs that does consulting work. So I think he's being a bit wary because I don't think he's tenured. I think he's a college prof, so you're basically part-time. So I think he's spreading out his income sources a bit, which is a smart thing to do. And the other person I want to mention is Steve Patterson. So he's a very recent phenomenon. I think he's only a few months old, really. And the reason why I found him is I think I'm still subscribed, although he hasn't done a lot of stuff lately, but there's what's called the SchoolSucksPodcast. And he, what's his name? Is his name Brett something. And this guy has struggled to do good videos and podcasts. And his niche was education. And there's not very many videos on education. There's not many people who take that as their specific content or ideas. But he's never gotten really good views, and I don't think he has any viral videos or anything with a lot of views on it. So I guess I'm not surprised that he hasn't done videos lately. But anyways, through the School Sucks podcast, that's where I found or saw the Steve Patterson guy who was being interviewed. And Steve Patterson, I think, did he do philosophy in school? I'm not quite sure what his background is. It must be philosophy, but I'm just not sure if he finished a degree or what. But anyways, recently he was doing some European tour, and he was interviewing philosophy professors at various universities. And one of them he interviewed was John Searle, who's a big name in ethics, although I think they talked about something else. But he's got some good content, and what he's been doing is he has a website, and he writes essays on various topics that are timely, like cultural appropriation, I think was a recent one, and then he reads it off in a audio clip type thing on his YouTube channel. And so he's got some good content. So he's I guess he's trying to make a go of this, and I don't think he's been featured anywhere else. I don't think I've ever seen him do interviews on any of the other main channels that I'm going to get into. But anyways, he's something to look at. I think he's got some good philosophy type videos, and of course timely topics on leftist stuff like cultural appropriation. Okay, so under the comedy